Tonight, it's all things Badgers. Grab a drink and join us on the Tailgate. All right, thank you everybody for joining us tonight on the Tailgate. As always, I'm Luke.
I'm Michael.
I'm Dennis.
And today we have somebody with us. It is Rich from the Buck Around podcast. Rich, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, guys. I thought for a minute I had to jump in there.
Oh,
but thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being on.
I'm excited to be here because I've been talking about Badger football with my co-host and a smattering of like one or two sort of semi-regular guests and friends for the last 3 or 4 months. So it's nice just to talk to somebody else who hasn't heard 85 of my theories, and they don't have to pretend to be 85 because you guys haven't heard them before.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to actually be genuinely shocked when you talk to her. So,
I'm going to start this like 85 theories. I'm like, jeez.
That's a lot of Wisconsin theories.
Yeah. I'm going to be here for a while.
That sounds about as many theories as they have on how Michigan didn't cheat. Sorry, that was a low blow early on. As an Ohio State fan,
I'm still bitter.
That's true. So one of the things that we do like to ask kind of everybody just kind of first off is Wisconsin, that's your team. Where did that come from? What made you a fan?
Oh, very simply, I went to school there.
Okay, perfect. Easy.
I am not from the Midwest. I am from the Northeast. I grew up in the Northeast, went to school in the Midwest, and came back to the Northeast, but I am still very much a Badger fan. I really enjoyed, the Northeast really doesn't have college football, sports around here. And if you go to, sort of your drive time sports radio, air quotes, well, we're on YouTube, I forget. So this works now.
Yeah, it does work.
When I do that, drive time sports radio here does not revolve around college anything, maybe a touch of UConn basketball here and there, but it's, Major League Baseball, NFL, all that stuff. So you weren't really exposed to it, and sort of going there and just seeing how sort of enjoyably, weirdly unique college football is, and how provincial it is, and how, especially in the Big Ten, just with the world's weirdest collection of rivalry trophies. Like, that's always my argument, I mean, there are multiple things related to Paul Bunyan for unclear reasons. And it just makes it cool and different. And I think it's such a departure from every other sport. It's starting to change, but just, the other ones that are so much more polished and, I guess the term I would use is homogenized. College football is not homogenized. It's starting to do that. We'll see what happens, but that was always what drew me in and what has kept me in. It's a very, very long answer. And, just in terms of my experience with the team when I was an undergraduate, and people will do the math to figure out how old I am, I was there with Ron Dane. Okay. So I got to see Ron Dane in the Rose Bowl. Saw them beat UCLA in the Rose Bowl. And so you really got to see something super cool.
Yeah.
And it has always sort of fueled me since, and like it kept me involved. So it's definitely, it's very much, it gives you an emotional tie and a sentimentality that connects you back to the school, even if you're maybe not in Madison every fall. Like, right. So yeah, that's a longer answer than you wanted, but that's what you got.
Oh no, that's we want what you have to say. That's it. So now, obviously, you've got Luke Fickell heading into year 2. I'm a little familiar with Fickell.
I guess you probably haven't heard of him, right?
No, never. It's being an Ohio State fan. I don't know that the name rings a bell. I think that was our last 6-6 season. It was his interim season. But I think what he did in Cincinnati was great. I really like him as the hire for Wisconsin. Going into year 2, obviously he kind of made that switch with Phil Longo from this ground and pound. You've got Ron Dane, you've got Jonathan Taylor, you've got this Melvin Gordon, this long history of amazing running backs, and now we're kind of flipping the script. Kind of what are the thoughts from you, from the fans, just from what you're hearing about all that, and how's that going?
So I would say anyone, broadly speaking, is going to be ageist, my age or younger was pretty cool with, okay, try something new.
Sure.
The Chris era, it was feeling a little, what it really was, Paul was 57 years old at the end there. And, he, in his mind was, I'm a Wisconsin guy. I've been here. I've been a lifer. I've been loyal. I had some really good seasons early on. I'm doing 3 more years and I'm out of here. And I'm kind of, he, in a weird way, was kind of like Nick Saban in that he was not really interested in trying to figure out how NIL was changing, how to adapt to that, how to recruit around that, and would get asked about it and then would speak a word salad, which when you're talking about Paul Frisk and saying he really spoke a word salad, that's the highest word salad there is. The fiber content in his answers would be super word salad-y. Just because he wouldn't say anything, and you can tell he kind of wasn't engaged with it, and it sort of tied into the whole idea of like he had an idea of the way things were going to be, and he wasn't really going to adapt or change. And Luke at least comes in, he's not that much younger. I mean, Luke's 50, I think 51, but you can tell he's a guy that is a little bit more driven to win and a little bit more willing to just adapt. I mean, he has a touch of that psychoticness that you need in a high-level football coach. He just has a burning desire to win, and he can't sleep for 5 days straight if he loses a football game type thing. And so I think, broadly speaking, people are okay with it. There is still there's a little bit of rumbling and grumbling, but I think mostly a lot of people watched this first season, which did not turn. I mean, a lot of people, I thought they were going to be 9-3, 10-2-ish in that last year in the Big Ten West, and they misfired on a few things that I think a lot of people were willing to chalk up to first year of transition. Sure. They definitely, and I'm sort of transitioning off it, but they definitely, I think, maybe overestimated what they had on defense in terms of talent and personnel. And on offense, they did okay, but they had some bad breaks. I mean, they lost their center for the season, who was the only guy who could snap. And if you're going to move to an air raid and then move a left guard into play center, and you're watching your quarterback doing, again, we're on YouTube, I can do this. Thinking, he's jumping 3 feet off. I mean, he had Tanner Mordecai has an amazing vertical. He could have definitely played guard. Not in the NBA, but maybe use the badge of basketball team if they wanted to, because he could get up there to save a snap. And it just, you watched an offense that was a bit just disjointed, but I think because of sort of the dysfunction of some people, I can't really look at it and be like, well, Phil Longo can't teach a center how to snap. Like, no one's making that as an honest argument. Right. So I think the jury is still out. Like, people are still willing to give it a chance to work because he recruited well. We talked about on our show last week, the 2024 recruiting class was the first time the Badgers ever hit, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Elliott's blue chip ratio, which is, 50% of your recruits have to be 4-star. It's the first time the Badgers have ever done it. The Badgers have always sort of functioned on finding the under the radar dudes and then coaching them up, and then as redshirt juniors they blossom, type of thing. And Luke definitely hit the ground running. I don't think he's going to hit it this year, just where they're at. I think they just got another one today, and I think they're at like 17 guys, and they've got room for maybe 22, 23. And so I don't think they're going to hit 12 4-star composites unless they get some boosts, get closer to signing day, but he is recruiting pretty well there. So I think overall people are cool with it. They're like 7 out of 10 right now. And given the fact that they went 7-5 again, which is basically what got Paul Chryst fired, I take that as people are willing to ride it out.
Yeah, and I mean, it's tough. One, new coach, that's always a hard thing. But two, when you're going into it and you're completely changing the way they're playing, 7-5, I'm with you. Like 9-3 is kind of what I was expecting. I was expecting them to do a little bit better. But 7-5, I mean, give it a year, give it 2 years, and I think Luke's going to have that buttoned up.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, the surprise, I think, was the defense, I'll be honest. And I think if you look at last year's recruiting class, and specifically the transfer portal, because I think the transfer portal always just tells you, where does a team have holes, right? Because that's where they're trying to plug and play, or where do they not have depth. And last year it was, a dozen, guys. And then I think of the 12, I think it's 10 on offense. I mean, it was a handful on defense, but I'm getting the number wrong. I'm trying to do it off the top of my head, but the idea is right. It was basically get wide receiver numbers in, because now we're sitting here and we're going to be running an air raid. So we need wide receivers is what those coaches are saying. And they didn't really touch the defense yet. This past class, it was basically the entire portal was defense plus a wide receiver and a running back.
Sure.
And so they definitely came out of last year saying, okay, they don't have the speed on the edge that they wanted. They didn't have the guys with the term you know what? I'm going to coin it on here, because we've been trying to come up with a term that's better than lengthy and athletic, because it's just too cliched. They have larger playmaking radiuses.
Oh, that's good.
They're not so much faster or leaner or necessarily taller. It's like they have long arms, and they're a little more, I want to use the word gangly because that has a negative connotation, but like they can get a finger on a football.
Right.
And they can get their hands on a guy in a larger area than the guys they had in the past. So I think if they can get that, and if they can get some burst on the edge, that's really what they need to make up defense.
Yeah, I hear catch radius a lot. That's the new
like a linebacker.
Yeah,
right?
true.
Does that work for a linebacker?
It doesn't really work. No, it doesn't. Yeah, I like. I'm going to stick with yours.
I like
use
the
that
terms because
I'll agree with you. You're our guest. I'll agree. That's the professional thing to do, right? Yeah, you're right.
I'm a guest in your house. Come on.
That's right.
So in an interview about a week ago, Luke Fickell, he was talking about, like, one of the biggest things that hurt them last year was depth. You've obviously alluded to some of that. He seems pretty confident going into this year that the depth issue maybe not be solved, but has been leveled up significantly for this upcoming season. Is that something that you would agree with? Obviously, he's the head coach, so he sees a lot more stuff on the ground than just the onlooker. But we can see who he signs. We see who he's bringing in through the portal and things like that. Do you feel like he's made the proper additions, or as a fan, are you going, I really wish he had done this?
No, I honestly think what they did in the portal, and believe me, I always come at this thing, I am the anti-Homer fan, if there ever is one. So if there is a negative to find, I will find it. Like I always say, like, I'd rather just be prepared for the letdown. As a Badger fan, you need to be prepared for the letdown. That's all it's about, is just you build this up, and then they rip your heart out and they smash it on the ground.
As a Tennessee fan, I understand.
Exactly. So, I mean, the big issues they had, I mean, the things I really think they needed to address were, number one, they needed help, like I said, at edge rush. They needed help at outside linebacker. They had a guy, Daryl Peterson, who was the guy who played the most I think he played the most snaps on the defense, or he might have played the second most snaps of the front seven. But nice player, not bad, not super bursty. They brought in two outside guys, Leon Lowry from Syracuse and John Pius, who's a guy who's from FCS from, I think it's William and Mary.
Okay.
Who they brought in, and both of them are very much a major, like when they step in and they're right away a part of the defense, you say, okay, Daryl Peterson's still here. Daryl Peterson's still in the rotation, but Daryl Peterson isn't going to be asked to play 55 snaps a game. Like, you're going to be down in the 35 snaps a game now, or the 30. And a guy can be much more useful in that.
Sure.
So they did a really good job there at outside. The place that I feel, again, defensively, that they were maybe even more, that was more just a skill issue, but maybe at inside linebacker wasn't so much skill, but it was mismatched skill. They did not have, again, going back to I forget what my term was already, but I guess it wasn't that good. My big arms, my not catch radius. They did not have guys that were great at being able to basically play anything kind of two-gap, because that was really what was the big change in this defense. When Jim Leonard was a defensive coordinator, it was very simple in a sense, in that it was, we line up the same way every time. We do something different every time, but your gap assignment pretty much before the snap. The way that Tressel's defense, Mike Tressel, defensive coordinator, his defense works, they wanted to go to this 3-3-5, and a lot of that is two-gap stuff with inside linebackers, and they just were a step behind. I mean, that's how they lost to Iowa. I mean, they had a guy go in the wrong hole there, and then, Iowa gets a 70-yard play, which is what they're waiting on, all season. But
that was about what they normally got in a game.
They doubled
the highlight.
They doubled their entire season's yardage.
So they, they just had guys who weren't quite attuned to what they wanted. So they brought in a guy, Gene Thomas, from Cincinnati. So he knows the system, and they haven't said it, but that guy's the starting inside linebacker. There's this guy, Jake Chaney, who's a senior, who's a captain. He's going to play plenty of snaps. Maybe he starts the game so they can sort of keep everybody happy. But Gene Thomas is definitely going to be a guy who I think is probably the one who gets the most snaps on the inside. They have another guy, Tackett Curtis, who the Badgers were after very hard with the old staff. Went to USC. He portaled. He's in. Old staff wanted him at outside. These guys want him at inside, which I think says a lot about sort of how they're running things a little bit differently. So, again, it's going to be the same thing. It's not going to be 2 or 3 guys who are playing 55 snaps. They're going to be able to rotate a little better. The place where I still think they have issues is defensive line. And Luke can say whatever he wants, but he knows he doesn't have the defensive line help he wants. They went real hard in the portal, really struck out. They got one guy from Albany, this guy Elijah Hills. So an FCS transfer, brought him in for the spring. You never heard his name. It sounds like he's going to probably bust. And to sort of drive that point home, they took another one post-spring, which I think is always like, you know what transfer portal is in December and January? Transfer portal in April that's your siren.
Yeah.
And they got this kid out of Stephen F. Austin to come in as a grad, this guy Brandon Lane, to come in as a grad transfer, who I think committed to 7 schools before he ended up at the Badgers. So they're looking, these are depth pieces.
Yeah.
They have a guy, James Thompson is, I think, like, he's a guy who could end up as sort of like, my co-host always loves to talk about all conference teams, and I hate it, but I'm going to use his methodology here. Like, this is a guy who I think could end up sort of like that honorable mention type of player. Like, he's better than replacement level, but nothing stupendous. But again, he can't play 55 snaps a game. There's another guy, Curtis Neal, who's really a nose. I mean, he's only 6 feet tall. He was a guy actually that Ohio State was after way back in the day too. And I always wondered, because he does not have the traditional measurables of a lineman, has plenty of burst and looked okay in the bowl game, like when he was asked to do a little bit more. But again, 6 feet tall, and I think we're stretching to get 6 feet.
Sure.
It's tricky to do on an every snap basis. And then after that is all guys who've been around, upperclassmen who have been 15 snap guys that you kind of wonder. So I think this defense, the one thing you can say about it is I think if they have enough at outside linebacker and the inside linebackers are better, you can minimize as much as you can issues on the line. It's still the line of scrimmage, don't get me wrong, but I think the defense can be okay. It can be in that, I always use terms in terms of, like, I always say, like, it's a top 20-ish defense. And I don't mean necessarily what that means statistically, but more for, like, what are you expecting from it? Snap in, snap out, week in, week out. It's not going to be amazing. It's not going to be like some of the great defenses they've had recently, because I just don't think it has the NFL talent on it, or at least we haven't seen the NFL talent on it yet. But it will be okay. The big question is going to be offense. So I think Tanner Mordecai, who was their quarterback last year, is going to go down as one of the most underappreciated players they ever had, in terms of his stat line is not good.
Right.
And that offense was kind of a hot mess just because of the snap issues. And they also had, like, you had Braylon Allen at running back, who people raved about because he was, basically started as a freshman, but wasn't really, I don't think was a great fit for this offense, because he's very much like, he really fit the old offense in terms of, hey, when we need 2 yards and a guy to fall forward, you give it to Braylon Allen and he can go, and you just mush 10 guys into the box and let it go. Whereas this offense wants guys who can catch balls.
Yeah.
They want guys out on swings in the flats, and it's functionally a part of the run game. And they tried to do that with him. And I could look up the numbers, but I think he was at something like under 5 yards per catch. I mean, and I think it might have even been under 4 he was never natural in space with the ball that way in terms of transitioning from a catch to turn. He just never could get the momentum. So I feel like Chez Malusi, if he can stay healthy, which is a big if, he's a guy who keeps breaking bones. Poor guy. Who's coming back for year 27 as a graduate.
Okay.
He's going to split time with this guy, Tui Walker, who's a 5'9" little ball of thunder who came from Oklahoma. I think they're a really good 1-2. The question is going to be who's going to be the third back. I mean, but they have, let me look here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have 8 scholarship running backs on the roster right now. Going into fall, assuming the last 2, Dylan Jones and Darian Dupree, enrolled, which for all we know, they did last week. But so they're going to find somebody there. You'd like to hope it's going to be one of the young guys, but they have bodies there.
Right.
Running game will be okay. Question's going to be the quarterback. It's Tyler Van Dyke from Miami. Can you do the reclamation project? Coming out of spring, it was basically Van Dyke and Braden Locke, who was the backup last year. I don't know how real the competition is. I think it may be Van Dyke is just a little slow on the uptake. I'd be really surprised if he's not the starter going into the fall. I think that poisons the well on the portal for you in the future if you're taking guys like that and it doesn't work out. But I feel like Van Dyke will be a step back at quarterback, but could be better just because they can.
Right. Sure.
And like the ball gets out at the mesh point, that kind of stuff where plays are running properly, where it's not a guy sort of picking the ball up off the ground and scrambling around trying to make something out of it, which Tanner Mordecai did as much as he could. But a guy like Van Dyke may just be better off running the play as designed, for lack of a better term, to keep it simple. And they may get enough to, I think the offense averaged about 23 points per game. I mean, if they can get it into the high 20s, I think the defense can be below that and they can be better.
Yeah.
But you just don't know it with the schedule, because the schedule.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things that I heard kind of Longo and Fickell kind of going back and forth with the quarterback was obviously Van Dyke comes in. This is his last year of eligibility. He's not going to come somewhere where he thinks he's going to be a backup. That just doesn't make any sense. But then you've seen both Fickell and Longo, I think, have said, hey, this is a four quarterback battle. All of them are going to have the opportunities. They're all going to be there. Fickell has said, though, that, he said he expects that Van Dyke is going to win it on the field. And realistically, like Braden Locke, as good as he's looked, if Tyler Van Dyke doesn't win this, I don't see the quarterback position going very well for y'all if he doesn't win it.
I mean, so I don't think Braden Locke Braden Locke played last year. And I will tell you, he was the best looking redshirt freshman quarterback I've seen on Wisconsin ever. And it was great. Don't get me.
Yeah, sure.
So he looked a little bit more there have been plenty, take Jack Cohn, was a guy who was a very productive quarterback for the Badgers 5 years ago. Ended up at Notre Dame, for people who are maybe, watching or listening who don't know. Very, nothing flashy, very efficient. I saw him play as a redshirt freshman, and the term that we always use when we talk about it was that was his baby deer. Wobbly knees. So Locke didn't have that. So I think Locke isn't terrible.
Yeah.
I don't think if Braden Locke wins this thing and Tyler Van Dyke falls on his face, it's like the end of the world. But I don't think the offense, you're losing mobility, which they keep saying Van Dyke has mobility. I watched every snap that he played in Miami, and I'm like,
yeah, I agree.
Technically, everybody has mobility.
I mean,
I could go out there and have some mobility.
Yeah, but I mean, he's not a natural.
Right.
He doesn't have that feel.
He's not a dual threat. He's not taking off for 40 yards.
And Locke isn't either. But I think what they just have to see out of Van Dyke is he has these fade moments where you're like, I don't understand what he just did. I was watching this last year when he got himself benched, and he'd have some games where everything's firing, and then all of a sudden, you just threw way late into triple coverage, and I don't know how Phil Longo fixes that. So he has physical tools. It's just going to be, and he's as as a nutmegger, I can say he's a fellow nutmegger, so I do have Connecticut pride there for the Fried of Glastonbury. So maybe he does us proud. But it'll be interesting to see what they can get out of him. If they could just get him to minimize mistakes, like keep it under 10 picks on the season, I think that'll go a long way. Because I think he could be a guy who gives you like 28 and 10 or 26 and 10, 26 and 8. And it won't be great, but it'll be functional.
Right.
And if the running game can work and you got some more options at wide receiver, they need something to stretch. Like that's what the other part they really just didn't have was somebody who could stretch the field. I mean, Will Pauling was their leading receiver. He's a nice slot receiver, but he's a guy who's going to catch the ball 12 yards down the field and fall in traffic. Like that's his job. His job is to move the chains. He's not the guy that's going to stretch it 70 yards downfield. And you saw a little bit of it against LSU when you finally saw Bryson Green break out a little bit. I mean, LSU's defense is a disaster. So take from that what you will. But he was kind of on and off hurt through the season. So if you're taking the optimist, take on this, it's like, okay, Bryson Green figures things out. You know what Will Pauling is. They have another young guy in Trechket Kahuna who's like 5'2", and is like this crazy little, scatty slot guy. But you're like, okay, maybe they can figure something out.
You can't catch what you can't see.
Exactly.
Everyone.
He's listed at 5'10", but then they have him doing media availability, standing next to a guy who is also listed at 5'10".
Yeah.
Like, on the guy.
He's standing at the table.
Yeah. Seriously, get the man to a stool. You're going to try to tell us. But, yeah. So we'll see.
Well, sometimes with your receivers, you need a game like that LSU game. That's got to get you into, even if it's a bad defense, you get some catches under your belt.
Confidence boost.
You get that confidence boost, and it
proof of concept, because for all these guys, this was new, right?
Yeah.
All this was a spring practice and then into a season that kind of went sideways pretty quick. Because I mean, it's a tricky team. Like Luke never came out and said it, but they had real locker room issues towards the end of the season. I think some of it was just. They just had some guys who maybe needed to move on, who maybe kind of had a little bit of that Paul Chris complacency, maybe.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not there. I'm not in their heads, so I don't even like saying that, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
But also, I think the coaching staff really built up in this team's mind that they could do big things. And between losing to Washington State and then the Ohio State game where that's the best. I mean, the Badgers lost by 14. That's the best the Badgers have played against Ohio State in 15 years.
Sure.
Because 2 years ago, that game basically got Paul Chryst fired. I mean, he was fired after the Illinois one, but that Ohio State game was a disgrace in terms of, like, you're in the same conference, and, like, you're trying to win this conference. You're not even in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
And you saw, at least Fickell brought that team in, and, again, there are no victories in losing by 14 points, and you hate moral victories, but they looked like they belong. But after that one, it looked like it broke.
Yeah.
And he had some guys go a little bit sideways, and then he had some players come out and say, there are guys on here who don't seem to be. Yeah. And you saw some people leave, and I think you can read between the lines on that. And they seem a little bit more dialed in. We'll see what it means, but I'm still, for me, it has been the hardest season to nail down what I think it is. Like, I've had ideas before and been wrong. I mean, who cares? I'm wrong in everything. Yeah. But at least I had an idea. Like, last year I said, this is a 9-3, 10-2-ish team based on the schedule and blah, 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 blah. Turned out wrong, but at least I had an idea. Like, you could tell me right now this team's going to be 4-8 or 9-3, and I'll be like, sure.
Yeah, you can kind of see the route to any of those.
Yeah. And, like, it's all feasible. Like, it's like everything could fall into sort of what I perceive, and it could still do that. So it's kind of wonky that way.
I guess kind of going with that, how do you see the upcoming season kind of being? If you have some prediction,
I feel like after that,
rolling right into it.
You kind of have a big prediction. We ask everyone.
Yep. So, right? Badgers have some big games next year.
You do.
They got Bama. They're going to USC. They got Penn State. They got Oregon.
The nice thing is that 3 of those are home games.
Yeah.
So Alabama, Penn State, and Oregon are all home games. So that's
helpful.
This is very on top of that, and this is one of those things where we're in June. I'm looking at my non-existent watch to see what month. But we're in June, and I'm starting to talk to myself into great things like I do every year. I don't know how convinced I am on USC. It's an 8-4 team losing the best player in college football to the draft. So let's see what it's going to be. It had terrible defense last year. So maybe that one's not as bad as you think, but I feel like they can win one of Alabama, USC, Oregon, Penn State, and maybe they could sneak 2, right? But I think that puts them best case in that 8-4, 9-3. I think they're more. Here's the thing. I think they're more likely to have the same record. I think they're more likely to be 7-5, but be a better team.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, play harder.
And the bigger thing I'm really curious about in the new Big Ten, which it's kind of still weird to think about Oregon and USC as conference games. I think it's been talked about ad nauseum, but for the middle class of the Big Ten, or let's call them like the cul-de-sac class. Like this is the upper middle class of the Big Ten. Like you have, I'd like to think the Badgers are in a different tier than, I don't know, Northwestern, right?
Yeah.
Like what does it mean for a fan base? Like a 7-5 or 8-4 season, given what they're going to get year in and year out, is a lot like those 10-2 off to the Rose Bowl seasons they had in the past. And is that going to be as satisfactory to a fan base as it is, as like when they went to 2018, they went 10-2, went to the Rose Bowl, lost to Oregon because they couldn't stop fumbling the ball. Almost beat Ohio State in the Big Ten title game. The tidal wave eventually came, and you're like, well, why couldn't they, like, that? People were happy about that, right?
Yeah.
Can they feel the same way when it's effectively as good a team, but it's going to go 8-4 and be like, yeah, we're looking at the outside of maybe the 12 seed. You know what I mean? Maybe they're the 16th best team in terms of the playoff rankings. So they don't make it, but they get, a fancy non-playoff. Well, like, is that going to mean as much? And I just don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough place to be in, because things are going to change so much, and it's like, how are the fan base's reactions to those things going to change, or are they? And if they don't change, if those expectations don't change, then you're looking at a lot of very unhappy fan bases coming up, because it's going to be different. It's going to be different.
Yeah, I mean, for the Wisconsins and the Iowas and the, we don't have to stay in the Big Ten, but, I wouldn't say Oregon. Oregon's pushing, but I think that's because they have a generational coach.
Yeah.
But, Ole Miss, use that. I mean, they're closer than the Badgers right in this moment. But for those kinds of schools that are sort of, Baylor in the puncher's chance schools, I don't know what it's going to be like going forward.
It'll be interesting. So, well, hey, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate you. Is there any parting things that we should know about Wisconsin before we let you go?
About Wisconsin, go to a Culver's.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'll tell people.
We've got
in Texas, they got them too.
Yep. We got some here in Tennessee too.
In Tennessee?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So they're where it's at. Other than that, if you want, I am one half of the Buck Around podcast. We do pretty much weekly. We do about 50 episodes a year, just on Badger football. We don't do any other sports, and we only do one team. And if you really want to get in the minutia of who the third string tight end is going to be, what you think of him, we're there. We just did, we do, I think, some fun stuff on the pod. We did a whole 4th down exercise comparing Luke Fickell from his Cincinnati days through his Wisconsin days against Paul Chris, because Luke got really tight.
Yeah.
And we kind of did a little deep dive on that, and I think that was just more a function of he had no idea what the hell that team was doing. Yeah. And coaches just get tight when that happens. But the thing I always will argue, a good portion of our listener base, probably like 10 to 15% of it, are people who are not Wisconsin fans. They tend to be other people around the Big Ten, and I think they're willing to listen because we obviously have a rooting interest, but we try to be as objective as possible, and we're not obnoxious, and we're not homers, and we're, nice guys. So
Very Midwest.
right.
Yeah, very Midwest feel.
Buck around. You can find us in any podcasting software, or just go to buckaroundpodcast.com. That just redirects to our link tree, and you can figure it out.
Got
If
all
you're
the
that interested, you'll find us. And theoretically, soon we'll be on YouTube, but I haven't said that on our show yet. So you guys got it.
We got it first.
Yeah, and you heard exclusively here, man.
Exclusive for now.
You did talk to all your other co-hosts before letting all that out, right? I mean, you did.
No, I didn't.
Okay, well,
I'm doing all the organization, so I get to do whatever.
there you go. No,
He's not putting together the artwork. Max, if you're listening,
Max, we're disappointed, man. We're disappointed.
you said it, not me.
Well, hey, Rich, we really appreciate your time and being on here with us. Guys, like you said, Buck Around Podcast, it's going to be in the description. Go there, follow them, subscribe to them. Make sure you're checking them out for your Badger basics. How's that? Is that
Basics. This is highly
well, the highly advanced. Okay.
Yeah, and remember he has
How
like
dare
80. He's got like 85 conspiracy theories or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
We only touched on like 2.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Man, I didn't have enough time.
you got to check in on the other 83. All right, Rich. Well, thank you so much. Hope you have a good night. We do appreciate you so much.
Yeah, no worries, guys. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you. Perfect.
That worked?
That was beautiful. So,
That was easy.
yeah.
I don't know how 3 of you do this together. 2 together is impossible. But then again, you're in the same room.
We're in the same room. You didn't see us pinching each other underneath the table.
Well, you guys behave.
I have bruises on my shin because of Luke.
That's right. Yeah, I kick a lot.
So are you guys all Ohio